The Pentagon is in panic. In a secure room deep inside Arlington, generals lean over glowing screens, their faces tight with disbelief. Reports spill in faster than they can read them. Swarms of Chinese drones practicing attack formations over the South China Sea. Russian suicide drones raining down on Ukrainian defenses in coordinated waves, and intelligence intercepts suggesting that America's most ambitious answer to this new era of warfare has already collapsed before it ever left the ground. The promise was called Replicator. It was supposed to be the revolution. Thousands of cheap, autonomous drones, mass-produced like bullets, able to overwhelm any adversary with sheer numbers and AI-driven precision. It was meant to close the gap with China's enormous factories and Russia's relentless improvisation on the battlefield. Instead, the program has become a graveyard of broken prototypes and wasted billions. The nightmare scenario is no longer hypothetical. It is here, and America isn't ready. Imagine this: a future war where U.S. aircraft carriers, once the pride of naval supremacy, are smothered under a black cloud of machines. Thousands of autonomous drones diving at once, overwhelming radar, slipping past defenses, crippling billion-dollar assets with weapons that cost a fraction of a single missile. Tanks, air bases, supply lines, all erased in minutes by fleets of machines built faster and cheaper than any Pentagon project could ever hope to match. This is not science fiction. It is the battlefield of tomorrow, and China and Russia are already there. The Pentagon's dream has faltered. The question haunting Washington is simple and terrifying. Has the United States already lost the race for drone dominance? Where are you watching this from right now? Tell us, because this isn't just America's problem. It's a global shift in warfare that could redraw borders and rewrite history. And if you want to stay ahead of what comes next, make sure you're with us, because this story is only beginning. It began with bold promises. In late 2023, senior officials at the Department of Defense unveiled a vision they called Replicator, a program meant to change everything about how America fights wars. For decades, the U.S. had relied on expensive, cutting-edge platforms, stealth fighters, nuclear submarines, missile defense systems costing tens of billions. But the war in Ukraine shattered illusions about the future of combat. Suddenly, cheap drones, small, agile, and nearly impossible to stop in large numbers, were destroying tanks, artillery, and entire supply depots. A handful of Iranian-made Shahed drones could bring down a power grid. Ukrainian quadcopters, costing a few $100s each, were halting armored advances. The Pentagon took notice. Replicator was supposed to be the answer. The concept was deceptively simple: mass. Thousands upon thousands of autonomous systems, not a few shiny prototypes. Swarms that could be built faster than enemies could destroy them, launched in waves that would overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers. These were to be the attritable systems, cheap enough to risk, smart enough to matter. Unlike legacy jets that cost over $100 million each, Replicator's drones were envisioned as disposable weapons of the future. Inside the Pentagon, the mood was electric when the program was announced. Press briefings hailed it as a turning point. For the first time in years, military planners spoke openly of matching China's industrial scale. The goal was to flood the battlefield with machines, mirroring what was already happening in Ukraine, but on a grander, global scale. There would be drone swarms at sea, patrolling skies, even coordinating with ground forces in real time. Advanced AI was to guide them, turning chaos into coordinated, lethal precision. The plan even had echoes of America's World War II strategy. Just as the arsenal of democracy once outproduced the Axis powers, Replicator would mass-produce the future of war. The Pentagon promised to deliver results in under 2 years. Contracts were rushed out. Defense leaders spoke of building a silicon shield around the US and its allies, a wall of autonomous machines that no adversary could breach. But behind the optimism, there were cracks. The timelines were impossibly short for a bureaucracy known to take decades on major projects. Tech companies lured into the program discovered that integrating AI with real-world battlefield conditions was far harder than the glossy presentations suggested. Cost estimates ballooned. A program meant to be rapid and disruptive began to look like so many other Pentagon projects, sluggish, overcomplicated, and vulnerable to politics. And as American engineers struggled to get prototypes off the ground, factories in China were already pumping out fleets of drones, tested, proven, and ready for war. While Replicator stumbled in its own maze of bureaucracy, China and Russia pressed forward with alarming speed. In vast industrial parks outside Shenzhen and Chengdu, drone factories run around the clock. Assembly lines there look more like consumer electronics plants than military facilities, machines built with the same efficiency and speed as smartphones. But instead of screens and batteries, they roll out hundreds of autonomous strike drones every day. By the time Washington was still arguing over funding allocations, China had already deployed swarms in live fire tests over the South China Sea. The footage, though never officially released, leaked through state media with a clear message: skies filled with coordinated formations of small aircraft, moving like schools of fish, guided by artificial intelligence that adjusted instantly to electronic jamming and missile fire. These were not one-off prototypes. They were mass-produced and cheap, designed to absorb losses without slowing the swarm. A single U.S. missile worth millions might take down one drone, while dozens more slipped through gaps in the shield. It was a terrifying equation, and Beijing knew it. Russia, though less industrially powerful, adapted in its own brutal way. The Shahed drones it purchased from Iran became templates for local production. Engineers in Moscow and St. Petersburg modified them, adding longer range, heavier warheads, and smarter navigation. Ukrainian soldiers now face waves of them almost every night, swarms so relentless that air defenses are depleted faster than they can be resupplied. The battlefield in Eastern Europe has become the most vivid warning of what swarms can do. Columns of tanks halted not by artillery, but by cheap flying bombs launched from hundreds of kilometers away. And Russia has begun experimenting with larger autonomous vehicles, drones that loiter above the front lines for hours, hunting radar signals, or sea drones that skim across the Black Sea at high speed, slipping under defenses before detonating against warships. In September, one such attack nearly crippled a Russian landing vessel in Sevastopol. Imagine that same tactic scaled up, hundreds of autonomous craft attacking a carrier strike group. What makes these developments most dangerous is not just the technology itself, but the cost curve. China can produce drones for a fraction of the price America pays. Russia has shown it can adapt and field weapons under the pressure of war. Together, they are proving that mass is the new currency of power. In this emerging arms race, the Pentagon is discovering that it's not the side with the best prototype that wins, but the side that can build and deploy at scale. And right now, scale belongs to Beijing and Moscow. Inside the Pentagon, the dream of Replicator was unraveling almost as soon as it was announced. What was meant to be a lightning-fast sprint toward mass production of autonomous systems became bogged down in the familiar swamp of American defense contracting. Committees multiplied. Meetings dragged on. Each branch of the military wanted its own tailored version of the drones, each insisting on unique requirements that drove up costs and delayed delivery. Instead of thousands of cheap, attritable machines, the prototypes began to look suspiciously like the gold-plated weapons of the past, over-designed, over-budget, and hopelessly late. Engineers tried to meet impossible deadlines, but the technology buckled under pressure. early test flights ended in spectacular failure. Drones meant to coordinate in swarms crashed into each other mid-air. Navigation systems jammed or failed under simulated battlefield conditions. In one infamous demonstration, a group of replicator drones lost contact with their control systems and spiraled into the desert floor, scattering wreckage across miles of test range. Privately, one officer admitted, "We spent $50 million to watch a swarm destroy itself." The problems weren't just technical, they were political. Major defense contractors, seeing billions in potential contracts, lobbied aggressively to control the program. Instead of nimble startups building cheap, disposable systems, the giants of the defense industry pushed designs that were heavier, more complex, and vastly more expensive. Costs ballooned. What was supposed to be a drone that could be built for under $100,000 began approaching the price of a small jet. The very principle of attritable warfare, the idea of fielding cheap systems in huge numbers, was undermined. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's procurement bureaucracy moved at a glacial pace. By the time contracts were signed and prototypes delivered, battlefield realities had already shifted. Ukraine's front lines showed new drone tactics every month, tactics the replicator program was too slow to absorb. Engineers complained they were designing for a war that had already passed them by. Billions of dollars evaporated into studies, white papers, and PowerPoint presentations. But when Congress demanded results, operational swarms that could be deployed quickly, the Pentagon had almost nothing to show. Behind closed doors, senior officials admitted the uncomfortable truth. The United States was losing not because of a lack of ideas, but because of its own system. The machine designed to build weapons of war had become too heavy, too slow, too consumed by politics and profit to deliver what was urgently needed. The replicator program, once hailed as the dawn of a new age, was on the edge of collapse. And every failure in Washington echoed louder, because China and Russia were already fielding their swarms in real conflicts. The contrast was brutal. America had slideshows, its adversaries had results. The danger is not abstract. It sits like a shadow over every flashpoint in the world where U.S. forces might one day be called to fight. In the Western Pacific, American war planners whisper about a nightmare scenario. Taiwan under siege, skies filled with Chinese drones pouring across the strait in numbers that defy comprehension. For decades, the U.S. Navy has relied on the Carrier Strike Group as its ultimate symbol of power projection. But what happens when a billion-dollar carrier becomes the target of 10,000 machines, each no larger than a suitcase, moving in coordinated waves, each carrying enough explosive to cripple radar, destroy aircraft on deck, or pierce a ship's hull? Defenses designed for missiles may not withstand the sheer mass of a swarm. A single missile battery, even an advanced one, runs dry after minutes of constant firing. The drones keep coming. In war games, some analysts estimate carriers could be disabled in under an hour. In Eastern Europe, the risk is equally dire. Russia has already demonstrated how relentless waves of suicide drones can wear down air defenses. Imagine that scaled to a NATO front. A swarm attack on a logistics hub in Poland or a forward base in the Baltics could overwhelm even layered Patriot and NASAMS systems. The supply lines that sustain NATO troops might vanish in fire and smoke before tanks or infantry even reach the front. The United States might find itself outmaneuvered, not by superior tanks or jets, but by a sky dark with cheap, intelligent machines. The Middle East provides another test case. Iran's proxies have already begun using drones to harass shipping in the Gulf, to strike oil facilities, and to test Israel's defenses. These are the low-end, early versions. The next generation, produced in larger numbers, will be faster, smarter, deadlier. If conflict erupts across the region, American bases in Kuwait, Qatar, or Saudi Arabia could be swarmed from multiple directions. Patriot systems designed to intercept a few ballistic missiles would face hundreds of small, autonomous craft diving at once. It is not hard to imagine power grids collapsing, fuel depots igniting, and runways cratered in minutes. What ties all these scenarios together is the brutal arithmetic of modern war. Drones invert the balance of cost. For every million-dollar interceptor America fires, adversaries can build dozens more attack drones. For every carrier group protected by layers of technology, there may be thousands of cheap machines designed only to break through by sheer persistence. The Pentagon has always prided itself on technological superiority, but in this race, superiority may not matter. Mass does. And that is the reality haunting Washington today. Without a dramatic shift, the United States risks being caught flat-footed in the next great conflict, facing adversaries who learned the lesson of the 21st century first. That the future of war belongs not to the biggest gun, but to the most drones in the sky. Deep inside the Pentagon, the mood has shifted from ambition to dread. The replicator program, once trumpeted as the Great Leap Forward, now hangs like a warning sign of America's deeper problem: speed. In the wars to come, the winner will not be the nation with the most advanced prototype, but the one that can flood the skies, seas, and battlefields with machines at scale. And right now, that advantage belongs to America's rivals. Generals know the stakes. If China unleashes swarms over Taiwan, or Russia over Eastern Europe, or Iran across the Middle East, the United States could face its most dangerous battlefield since World War II, and it may be outnumbered before the first shot is fired. Aircraft carriers, Patriot batteries, armored columns, all could be erased by waves of autonomous drones so cheap and abundant that no defense system can keep up. For the first time in generations, the Pentagon must admit that its dominance is no longer guaranteed. The collapse of Replicator is more than a failed program. It is a signal that America's war machine is too heavy, too slow, too tangled in politics and profit to keep pace with adversaries willing to move fast and break rules. Billions have been spent, but the skies remain empty, while factories in Beijing and Moscow roar with production. The vision that once electrified Washington, the idea of endless swarms rising from American bases to meet any threat, is now just another PowerPoint fantasy. And yet, the threat is not years away. It is here, pressing closer every month, measured in the growing shadows of drone fleets already in service abroad. The question is stark. Can the United States tear down its own walls of bureaucracy, rethink its approach, and recover before the first great swarm of the 21st century darkens the skies of a real battlefield? Or has the future already been lost, handed to those who learned that in modern war, victory does not belong to the most powerful, but to the most relentless? Because in the silence after Replicator's collapse, one truth